I've been reviewing the Hills of Eyes 1977 version and 2006 version. Basically, the 1977 version was directed by Wes Craven, and the remake version was directed by Alexandra Asia in 2006. The film is about a family going on a road trip going through the desert, and they break down. And there's basically a group of cannibals living in the surrounding hills, which start to hunt them down and kill them. The original Hills of Eyes was created in 1977. The director, Wes Craven, is well known for horror films, the horror genre in general. Some of his well-known films are Nightmare on Elm Street and The Last House on the Left. Also, in recent times, the Scream trilogy. The Hills of Eyes was classed in the horror genre and was quite an aspect of gore to it as well, more in the remake version due to the use of CGI and more extensive makeup and just everything in general. The remake was made in 2006, directed by Alexandra Asia, and the plot of the two films was pretty much the same, but there were quite a few differences, which we'll get onto a bit later. Like I said, the new one is a lot more gorier, plainly just down to the use of CGI and the fact that Alexandra Asia is more of a gruesome director. There was a sequel to both films and a remake of the second film, which wasn't as successful, wasn't even brought into the cinemas, just called The Hills of Eyes 2. Just information about the grossing of the movie. The 1977 version had just a budget of $230,000, so it was quite a low budget movie. And at the box office it actually took $25 million, which meant the gross profit of the movie was $24,770,000, which meant the gross margin was 99%. So it was quite a success for its time. The 2006 version had a budget of $15 million, and at the box office it took $69,623,713. The gross profit of the movie was $54,623,713, which meant the gross margin of the movie was 74%. The technologies of the production. The 1977 version was very low budget, limited special effects, but for the time it was very popular. People found it scary. A lot of makeup was used to create, the effect that the cannibals were monsters. They weren't human friendly. They were evil. But obviously, quite a low budget. The film was set over 30 years ago, so very different to the remake. Very basic compared to the movies that we see these days. In the remake, makeup was used quite a lot. I mean, the people in the remake were actually deformed due to a nuclear explosion, so they had much more extensive face makeup, body makeup, head deformities, things like that. Special effects were used a lot more to create more gore, especially one particular scene where the dad actually gets burnt alive. It actually took 3 hours a day sometimes to do up some of the cannibals, so that they looked quite scary and incredible. Distribution and exhibition. The original was released in the USA on the 22nd of July 1977, and it wasn't released onto VHS video until 1987, which is 10 years later in the UK. Technology wasn't as strong back then, so there was always such a long wait for movies to be released after cinema. There was no digital media back in the 70s, so it was hard for them to be watched. There was no internet or anything like that. As soon as videotapes came along, it became obviously a lot more easier to get videos to watch at home. Trends for the movie. The 1970s and 80s were mainly known for the horror slasher genre, with like the films like Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday 13th, Hills of Eyes, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. All of those films have actually been remade in the 2000s. Cult gore films were very big in the 70s. With the remake, from 2000 onwards, remakes of horror movies was the thing that was in, which this included obviously Hills of Eyes, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. There was a Nightmare on Elm Street remake, and it was seeing the dawn of more gore movies. So directors are trying to push the boundaries of how far they could actually go in the gore genre, especially with the likes of movies like Saw, Hostel, movies like that. So the Hills of Eyes did fit into the trends of their time. The cast of the movie, the two movies actually did have pretty much the same characters, all had the same names. There were a few differences. I think some of the cannibals were different names. I've just researched a few. As you see, Mercury, Pluto and Jupiter were the three cannibals in it, the sons. Two of them were not actually in the remake, but they were replaced by other names. Big Bob Carter and Ethel Carter, they basically play the mum and dad of the family that's travelling through the desert. The 1970 version, Bob was played by Russ Grieve, and in the latest one was played by Ted Levine. Ethel Carter, played by Virginia Vincent in the original, and Kathleen Quinlan in the remake. The film wasn't, didn't have any big Hollywood A-star actors. It was quite a low budget. Both films were quite low budget for what they were. Character comparison. I looked at Pluto, who was kind of the main cannibal, especially in the original, that pretty much based around him. Played by Michael Berryman in the 1977 version. And Berryman had a rare medical condition, and it was called hypovibrotic ectodermal dysplasia. This means basically he has no sweat glands, no fingernails, no hair, and no teeth. Due to his unusual look, horror directors at the time especially were always willing to snap him up to play like a creature of some sort, so in this case a bloodthirsty cannibal. He still appears in a lot of movies today, like, you don't have to do much makeup to him. He's got this sort of horror movie face, been snapped up by many directors. Wes Craven in particular used him for a couple of movies. In the 2006 version, Pluto was played by Michael Bailey Smith. He's appeared in many films since the 1990s. He actually suffered a quite severe accident back in the 1980s, which stopped him from his original career of being a professional footballer, so he went into the acting profession. Quite a big guy, started bodybuilding, has appeared in lots of television shows and movies, from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, was in Men in Black 2. Pluto was his most well-known role in the 2000s. Wore a lot of makeup and special effects were used to create him. He actually used lots of padding around his head to make his head look huge for the mutated look. Just some social, political and regulatory factors. The film was released in the late 1970s, and it felt like directors were trying to be more and more outrageous, trying to push boundaries as much as they could, because many films have been banned in that decade, especially some examples were Scum and The Exorcist, which had very mixed reviews when it was released. The Hills Have Eyes did have some controversial moments in it, especially when the dad is burnt alive. That's quite a graphic scene. But there was nothing in the movie that caused an uproar or anything like that. There were no issues of alcohol or drug abuse really. It was just a common American family who bumped into some psychopathic cannibals out in the hills. No racial abuse, no sexual abuse, no homophobia at all. A few disturbing scenes were actually in the film. There was actually a scene where one of the girls is raped. It's more graphic. It wasn't as graphic in the original, but quite graphic in the remake. And there is one of the scenes where a monster actually starts drinking a woman's breast milk, which was quite weird, quite unusual to see in the film. Movie is rated 18, so obviously youngsters are not advised to watch it. I'm sure some do, but parents can't moan because the rating's there it's for adults. So, movie came out in the 1970s when slasher horror movies were all the rage. Didn't hit any criticism. Wasn't a popular film, but you know, it reached number 47 on the horror movies of the decade in the 70s. In the remake, the monsters were hit with a radioactive blast, which made them more deformed. As in the original, they were just cannibals. They were humans, but nothing actually happened to them. Whereas in this one, their town's in the edge of a nuclear radioactive site, which they got the after effects of that, which I suppose is why they hate people. No characters were displayed as homosexual or feminist or racist, or no one was picked on anymore. It was just a standard horror film. And that's about it for the social factors. Some synergies between the films. The Hills of Our Stories were very similar, but the remake did have a few differences, quite a few differences, especially from the last half of the film. They did change what happened, the turn of events that happened towards the end. The beginning of the film, in the first one, in the original, shows a family, the cannibal family, having problems years prior to what we're going to watch, the story unfolds. But in the newest one, it's actually, you see a group of scientists getting ripped apart by a group of mutated cannibals, which sets the scene for obviously a nuclear bomb testing site. Another difference is how the cars crash, actually. As they're going through both films are set in the desert, but in the original, the film, the tyre bursts and the car crashes into a rock, whereas in the new film, the car is stopped by a booby trap, which is put there on purpose by the cannibals. You actually see, as the car crashes, you actually see the trap get pulled up and the cannibals run away. Many scenes are similar. Probably the most famous scene is the dad getting burnt alive. That is featured in both. I think there is a slight difference though. In the original, he's put on a spike and hung up like that, and in the new remake, he's actually hung from a tree. Another example is when Pluto and another mutant break into the caravan. This scene was in both the original and the remake, and one of the mutants goes and tries to rape the young girl that's in there, and the other one steals the baby. But again, they were slightly different as the way they were made, which I think is good, because if they were exactly the same, it'd be a bit pointless. Last part of the film differs a lot from the original, actually. The ending's completely different, as in the original, a young girl, one of the young girls who's part of the family, the cannibalistic family, but is actually trying to help the family, the other family, the American family. She actually gets a rattlesnake, throws it in her brother's face, because obviously this girl's her younger sister, which allows the Americans to then beat him up, kill the cannibal, and then they get away safe like that. In the remake, the girl runs towards the last cannibal, pushes him off the edge, so it sacrifices herself, so it kills the cannibal and herself, which then allows 4 of the American family to get away safely. Integration. The original was produced and distributed by Vanguard, who aren't actually around anymore. The remake was produced and distributed by Fox Searchlight Pictures. The remake was produced by Wes Craven and Peter Locke together, and the original was produced by Peter Locke, same producer for both films. Peter Locke was responsible for producing films like Beowulf and The Secret Kingdom. Quite, not low budget, but less known films he's most well known for. Vanguard were actually a record label set up in the 1950s, and they mainly distributed music, but did a handful of films as well. Just an overview of what I thought of the films. I am a fan of this genre, of the horror genre, and I've got to say I did like the remake a little bit more, just because obviously, you know, I was born 20 years after the original was made, so I'm used to seeing newer type films. I do enjoy originals, but I just found it was more entertaining to watch. You know, the use of CGI, better makeup, just more professional. I like the idea that they were mutants instead of just this weird cannibalistic family. Thought it was a lot more graphic, a lot more time spent. It was a higher budget movie, but I still really enjoyed both the films. Story's roughly the same, slight twists and turns. Like, you know, obviously, I like the idea that it's different. If it was just the exact same, there wouldn't really be any point. I usually do prefer original films, like with especially horror. Especially one example is Nightmare on Elm Street. I love the original, not too keen on the remake. I didn't really find that the film scared me, either the original or the remake. I found it was more of a thrilling to watch, like a lot of tense scenes, like if they're going to live, you have no idea who's going to live, who's going to die. I mean, usually in horror films it's quite obvious to tell who's going to survive, who's going to die, but in this one I found it quite tricky. You didn't really know what was going to happen, obviously, because they're mutants, they're weird, they're crazy, you don't know what they're going to do, what they're capable of. I'd definitely say both movies are worth a watch. Even if you're not a fan of the horror genre, they're still entertaining, good to, just enjoyable to watch overall. My star rating for the films, I'd give the original a 2 out of 5, and I'd give the remake a 3 out of 5. Plainly just because, you know, The Hills of Ice was more when I was growing up. It's the one I watched first. I only watched The Hills of Ice recently, and after watching the original after the remake, it just doesn't seem as good, which is a shame.